Good morning, everybody. So we should be live now. If anyone on the chat could confirm that everybody can hear me well, that would be amazing. If there's any IT problems, you're also happily invited to put them in the chat, and we can try to solve them for you. But very warm welcome today to this webinar on a, well, for me as a tax lawyer, extremely exciting topic, commuter compliance. Obviously a little bit of a niche topic, but highly complex and I think super, super interesting. Well, hopefully also for you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Again, a warm welcome. So we're going to spend 45 minutes up to an hour on, let's say, explaining things around commuter compliance, also showing a little bit of a demo of the WorkFlex platform on how we solve commuter compliance. But you are very, very invited to join, to share any questions or remarks with us. If you have any, I would be really happy to see maybe some specific commuter cases that you've got at hand where you struggle with that we may be able to take here. How do you do this? There should be a questions button somewhere in your screen. It basically opens the chat and then you can post your question. All right. So, but first things first, maybe we start with a quick introduction, and I'll go because I started talking anyway. So my name is Pieter Manden. I am Dutch. So sitting here in my home office in Amsterdam, and my background is in tax law. Used to be a tax consultant for quite some time at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. First here in the Netherlands, then also a good number of years in Germany, always in the area of global mobility and employer compliance when people are temporarily working from abroad for whatever reason. My last role was director, responsible for the remote work proposition of PwC. But then a little bit over 3 years ago, I started together with my co-founder, Patrick, WorkFlex. I'll tell you a little bit more about WorkFlex, but my role here at WorkFlex is, well, one of the co-founders, but everything compliance is on my table, basically. But we are a tech platform, so we have a beautiful technology platform, which is basically owned and curated by product managers like Kody. So I've brought Kody with me here today. Kody, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so my name's Kody Melo. A Canadian recently based out of Barcelona in Spain here. Yeah, product manager for WorkFlex for just about a year now, and have been able to collaborate with Peter and the rest of our compliance team on building a commuter solution and bringing it to market. Yeah, my background has been let's call it a professional product manager, at least getting paid for the role for about 7, almost going on 8 years now, working at various different industries. And yeah, pretty stoked to have everyone here and chat about some of the solutions that we're bringing to market.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So maybe also a quick introduction on WorkFlex. You found us here, so I guess you've seen a little bit about us, but I would like to tell a little bit of like the story, the things that we try to achieve before we dive into well, one of the specific use cases that the platform now offers, commuters. So we started 3 years ago trying to, let's say, change global mobility compliance. Back in the day, you'd use, let's say, people like me at Big Four companies for this, asking them questions. You get a memo and a high invoice. Not so practical and definitely not technology driven. But since the pandemic, global mobility has dramatically changed. Kind of focus went away from focusing on 2-3% of the population, expats, and spending a lot of money on those, rather towards, well, global mobility for the masses, how I'd like to call it. Everybody could technically be a workationer. There are many business travelers. There used to be a lot of business travelers already, but global mobility wasn't really used to having the responsibility for this. And we've seen a very important shift towards global mobility for this, taking ownership, rightfully, I think, for this topic. And given the volume of business travelers and business trips, it makes sense building a technology for this. Well, that was the starting point for WorkFlex. We started off with workation compliance. We added business travel compliance to the platform. Now we've added commuter compliance very recently. And our objective is to build the world's first global mobility compliance platform that really offers or really includes all the global mobility persona that you can kind of think of. So we're currently working on the assignments. It's actually going live in this month. but we're also going to add use cases like remote workers, matrix managers, project workers. So we're definitely not done. The beauty is very strongly tech-driven and all the data in one platform. And of course, if you have data on where your people are, that's when you can really start becoming compliant for all of these topics. So that's what we're doing at WorkFlex. You can see that it's actually a technology platform here. We'll show it live in a second. So like I said, it includes now business travel, work from anywhere, workations, commutes, and assignments as of this month. And we automate all topics compliance for these global mobility use cases. All right, so apologize for not the prettiest slide ever, but I think I prefer quality over content. So we're going to touch on 4 topics in this webinar. First, getting the basics right, like answering the question or discussing the question, who is actually a commuter? Describing what the compliance complexity is for commuters, how WorkFlex then just tries to solve this for you, and we would also show you the platform to show you that it's really there, but also show you how, let's say, intuitive it is and how easy to use and how it's effectively solving the problem. Again, if you have any questions or remarks in the process, please feel free to use the chat functionality for this. I'll try to keep an eye on it. I'm only just a guy, so I can't really do 2 things at the same time, but I'll try, and I've got Kody with me anyway who can support on this as well. All right, so first things first, who is a commuter? I think that one's pretty simple. At least if you're from the global mobility world, we would agree that commuters are employees that cross a border whilst commuting between home and work. Of course, regular employees also commute, I don't know, from maybe somewhere just outside of Berlin to Berlin and back home in the evening. Well, they're still commuters, but they're not commuters in the global mobility sense of the word. We focus on people that cross a border when they're commuting. So you can see 2 examples here. It would be an employee living in Austria, but then working in Germany, or an employee living in Germany and then working in Luxembourg. Obviously, in the area around Luxembourg, there are a lot of commuters because Luxembourg isn't that big, and the people tend to live in, let's say, the neighboring countries. One of them would be Germany. So they would be commuters. Important to note that remote workers are not commuters. So if you've got, let's say, to stick with example number 1, an employee living in Austria, but also constantly working from Austria, that is a remote worker and is not a commuter. We do expect commuters to have a contract in Germany in this example, and are probably also supposed to be in Germany quite often. Remote workers would have a residency in Austria, but also an Austrian employment contract. And those would be remote workers. Very interesting also from a compliance perspective, but not a relevant use case for, let's say, this commuter solution that we've built here within WorkFlex. And then also in the rest of this webinar, we'll be talking about official and non-official commuters a bit. It's important to differentiate between them, but of course, it comes down to the message that, look, if someone's traveling between 2 countries to commute to work, they are always a commuter. The question for compliance purposes, whether they are an official or a non-official commuter, is very relevant and originates from the double tax treaty between the 2 countries at hand. So for instance, between Austria and Germany, there is a specific commuter clause in the double tax treaty on the basis of which you would qualify this someone as a official commuter. Not all commuters are official commuters, though. It would basically mean that you're not applying this clause in the double tax treaty. And it has a different impact on the tax and social security. We'll get to that in a second. So off to the second topic. What is the compliance complexity for commuters? There's basically 2 what we call risk dimensions that are affected for commuters. And that would be, you can see them here, wage tax and social security. Of course, related to wage tax is personal income tax, but personal income tax is usually not an employer matter, and we're focusing on employers here. So that's why we're talking wage tax. And it's pretty simple. So you can see it here, a commuter doesn't always just pay taxes in the work country, like if you're not a commuter, you and I are probably doing. For a commuter, this can be a mix between the home country and the work country. Technically, you could even see that someone would only be taxable in the home country, pretty unlikely, but it's basically not a given that someone pays all of his or her wage tax in the work country, which is the standard in the world, of course. And more or less the same for Social Security. You and I are probably all socially secured in the country where we live and work, but for commuters, this might be different. They can be insured in the work country, they can be insured in the home country. If there isn't a social security treaty in place, they can even be socially secured in both countries. So that's the compliance complexity for social security. Now, there's another layer of complexity to this because we've got, let's say, the theoretical or the academic truth for commuters in the area of wage tax and social security, but it's very important to understand that how wage tax and social security play out for the individual doesn't really depend on what you kind of agree with the commuter on. No, it really depends on the actual presence of this individual between the home country and the work country, even in other countries if we're talking a heavy business traveler. So actual presence is the driving factor for where wage tax is to be withheld, to what extent. And it's also the driving factor for where our social security insurances do, where is this individual socially secured. It doesn't change or doesn't take away the fact that you will usually see a preferred setup, and you can see it here at the bottom of the slide. You usually see a preferred setup of the wage tax and social security status of the employer and the employee, basically what you would agree upon, for instance, in a commuter agreement, where you would say, look, we would expect you to be in the work country for so many days per week, as a result of which, but that might not be described in that agreement, as a result of which a full payroll in the work country is justified and or a full social security is justified in that same country. But that's exactly the complexity. I think people are struggling to understand, well, that the academic truth, what triggers or what parameters affect where someone's taxable and what parameters affect where someone's socially securable. And on the other hand, then, okay, but look, now we've got an agreement and we're supposed to live that agreement, but we're not really tracking it. And that can mean that in practice, the whole, let's say, academic truth that you agreed upon with the individual is nonsense, incorrect, and there should actually be a different setup of the payroll, both for taxes and for social security. So that's the compliance complexity here. And let's dive into two examples to make it a little bit more concrete. So here we've got a commuter living in Austria, working in Germany, the example that we saw before. And now we're actually talking an official commuter, living and working in what's called the border zone. So I already mentioned there's official commuters and non-official commuters. Between Austria and Germany, the tax treaty says if you are living and working in what they call the border zone, you can actually be an official commuter. If you're not or working in the border zone, then you wouldn't be an official commuter for the tax treaty. Doesn't mean that you would still qualify as a commuter, obviously. But like I said earlier, being an official commuter would then change the impact on your taxes and social security. So in the tax treaty between Germany and Austria, as I said, there's a border zone, basically a couple of 100 kilometers from the border on both ends. And the tax treaty says that a commuter that lives in Austria and works in Germany could remain taxable in Germany as long as the number of working days outside the border zone remains below 45 days, more or less 20% of the working time. So what you'd actually be looking for here in practice is, say, the number of working days outside the border zone. Pretty simple. Home office, because this individual lives in the border zone, is in border zone. The work days in the office are also work days within the border zone. So you're really only looking for the days that are spent outside of the border zone, for instance, for a business trip in another region in Germany or another place in Austria. Now, for taxation, there's a totally different treaty relevant. It's obviously, let's say, the European-wide Social Security Treaty. And that one says that this individual can remain socially secured in Germany as long as the working days are in Austria, so in the country, it doesn't refer to the border zone at all, are below 50%. It's very interesting. Of course, you can see here that like 20% and 50% are very different percentages, but it's important to remember that for the taxation, we're talking 20% of outside of the border zone. And for Social Security, the border zone is irrelevant. You're really looking at just the two countries. So that makes it a little bit complex, that sometimes a situation would feel right for Social Security, but has totally exceeded thresholds for taxation. Second example, we've got a commuter living in Germany, but now working in Luxembourg. Now, the tax treaty between Germany and Luxembourg doesn't have a border zone or an official qualification like this, but you would qualify, in our view, as an official commuter if you're applying the so-called 34-day rule. Remember, for Austria-Germany, there was a 45-day rule outside the border zone. In this country combination, Germany and Luxembourg, there's no border zone, there's no 45 days, there's a totally different thresholds. And between any other country combination, you will see differences in the specific arrangement. Good for you, at least around Luxembourg, you'll see a lot of 34 days. And what do these 34 days actually mean? Basically, it would mean that this individual can remain taxable in Luxembourg as long as the number of working days in Germany are below 34 days in the calendar year. However, if the individual spends more than 34 working days in Germany or outside of Luxembourg, at least, there will be a taxation split coming up based on, let's say, the fundamental rules of taxation. You are taxed where the work is being performed. So then, to stick with this example, you see a partial taxability coming up in Germany. What's very important for this is that, what is a working day in Germany? Of course, if you're working the entire day from the home office, that qualifies as a working day. It's not entirely clear when something starts to qualify as a working day, but what is clear is that working days are, let's say, present much faster than you think. In general, the kind of agreed upon rule seems to be 30 minutes. If you jump on a 30-minute call from your home office in Germany, it qualifies as 1 day. And if you only have 34 days in your little bucket for the entire year, you can imagine that in today's working reality, people that are commuting between Germany and Luxembourg really, really, really need to be careful on how much time they spend working from home, because they are very likely to exceed or to establish a working day from home if they just take a call in the evening or send out a couple of emails in the evening. And 1 day out of 34, or in total 34, is just a very, very low number. So what we expect to see now with the new working reality is that in all combinations with Luxembourg, employers and commuters need to be very, very strict on, look, we need you in the office. We need you to come to Luxembourg. And we also need you to refrain from working once you're back home. Or accept the new reality and accept a little bit more complexity maybe, and say, look, you're going to be working from home more than 34 days, which is totally fine. But that leads to a payroll split where we're taxing both your income partially in Germany and then partially in Luxembourg. So as you can tell, I'm super excited about like the compliance technicalities about this. I hope I'm not making it too complex. Again, if you have any questions, anything's unclear, please feel free to just put it in the chat. I've got here the chat open so far. Thanks, Leonard, for the feedback. I appreciate it. So on Social Security, you remember this from the previous slide. There's again a 50% threshold. I think Social Security is just a lot better aligned between the European countries, at least, because here also, if you are working below 50% of your time in Germany, you could continue to be socially secured in Luxembourg. In general, an interesting trend. I think Social Security has done a pretty good job aligning systems throughout at least Europe, but also internationally, to be frank. With taxes, that is very different. Yeah, that's a lot more complex. And like I said, you'll see different arrangements between Austria and Germany, now here, Luxembourg and Germany, but there's also very interesting arrangements in place between, for instance, Switzerland and France, or the Netherlands and Belgium. All right, so these are just two examples. So how WorkFlex solves this, and then we'll go into the demo after. I think we're good in time, so I'll spend some time on this. So in order to check commuter compliance, we've done three things. First, of course, without information, you will never be compliant. So we need a little bit of information when we're talking a commuter. An essential part of a commuter compliance solution, so to say, is also a travel calendar. We'll show it to you, but I'll explain beforehand what it is and why we actually need it. And then the true magic lies here in these two compliance statuses, or stati for the Latin lovers amongst us. An ongoing compliance status that checks, are you paying taxes correctly, or are you, let's say, remitting Social Security contributions in the right country? So we go through all of these step by step. So what we would need for a commuter on the platform, basically it's very simple. You just tick a box and say, well, Kody has as of now become a commuter. We will ask for a little bit more information from you. Obviously, we need to know where you live and where you work. We need to know where you are paying Social Security contributions today, home or work. Technically, it can be both, but very unlikely. And by the way, if you're doing this, please contact us. I'd love to see if we can maybe make it a little bit cheaper for you, because paying Social Security premiums in two countries is just expensive. We would also have to know where you are currently paying taxes. And this is not necessarily correct. Same goes for the Social Security. It might actually be the wrong country that you're paying Social Security contributions in. But we need to know your current / preferred setup, what you're currently doing. Where are you remitting Social Security contributions, and where are you withholding wage tax for the individual? For taxes, that could be, like I said earlier, home, work, or a so-called payroll split, say 50-50, because we expect, or we want the individual to work in the home country for half of his or her time and the work country for the other half of the time. And then we would need to know whether this individual would be an official commuter, like we mentioned earlier. This country, like this, let's say, checkbox doesn't exist for every country combination. If the treaty doesn't provide for an official commuter arrangement, we're obviously not asking this. Maybe it's a difficult question to answer for someone, like he or she might not know whether they're an official commuter. Of course, there's information pop-ups, but I think main rule, we can kind of assume that if someone is an official commuter, applying the 34 days rule between Germany and Luxembourg, or applying this border zone rule between Austria and Germany, they will know and they will be able to check that box. So pretty simple, and Kody will show later on that it's indeed pretty simple just to provide us with this information. And then the commuter is basically all set for getting ongoing compliance, right? What you might need, by the way, as well, when you're setting up a commuter for the first time, is a commuter agreement. We've got a template for you. We can give some guidance. It's not rocket science. It's basically an agreement between you and the individual, the commuter, outlining, look, we are thinking you're socially secured in the home country, but for this, we need you to do this and this. And we're applying a 100% payroll split in the work country, but this means we require you to be in the home office or in the work office for so many days per week. It's a commuter agreement. We can provide you with a template for that. That's upon setup, not necessarily onto the platform, but rather in, let's say, your daily life. All right, let's go to the travel calendar.
Hey, Peter, maybe before jumping to the travel calendar, we have two questions in the chat that I think we probably address right now.
Thanks for that. I just switched to the chat, and now I'm seeing in the questions. How is a salary split possible? Does the employer need a subsidiary in both countries? And how are business trips to third countries counted as days in home country or in work country? Yeah, amazing questions. Thanks, Sabina and Anne. A salary split is possible. There's two ways of doing a salary split, Sabina. it would definitely be easiest to say you run payrolls in both countries. Well, one of them is not a problem, right? Because it's probably the company residence, maybe in Germany. There you've got your GmbH running payroll, etc. Well, not a problem. But now maybe you also want to run a partial payroll in Austria, but you have zero presence there. Yeah, option one would be to create presence there. Doesn't have to be a subsidiary, because a subsidiary is rather, let's say, a corporate tax presence. You can also register just as what we call a withholding agent, or just an employer registration, which would allow you to run payroll, but it doesn't mean that you're actually creating a subsidiary. So that would be option one. The other option, in some country combinations, it's not necessarily recommended. You could take the position that in the other country, you wouldn't run payroll, but you would leave it up to the employee to remit the correct wage taxes at the end of the year through his or her personal income tax declaration. I wouldn't recommend this at all. I think registering as an employer is really pretty simple. Just requires a couple of forms and a registration left or right, and a local payroll provider. But a local payroll provider would, let's say, charge you maybe €100 per individual per month. So it's not the end of the world. So I think it justifies the effort or the ambition to be compliant. Just one additional note maybe to this one, because as soon as you're only registering as an employer, of course, permanent establishment topics come up, because apparently you have presence in, to stick with the example, Austria, and you've only registered as an employer because you feel you are wage tax liable as the company. It does trigger the question, maybe with the authorities, but hopefully definitely within your organization. All right, we've got someone sitting there apparently in Austria, working quite some time from his or her home office, maybe a shared office, I don't know. Does this actually create a permanent establishment, a Betriebsstätte in German? So just as a heads up, if you do have a Betriebsstätte or a permanent establishment, of course, you can't just get away with registering as an employer. Then you would definitely, or not definitely, then it's very much recommended to actually establish a subsidiary. Anna, to your question, how are business trips to third countries counted? As days in home country or in the work country? Basically, it depends on where they go to, because of course you can have business trips in the work country and you can have business trips in the work country. So it depends a little bit. If you have business trips to other countries, you'd have to basically go back to the other slide and I'll show you. I'm so excited about this topic. I know I'm a little bit nerdy, but I'm totally fine with it. So if you're, for instance, looking at the 40-day rule, it says when you're working from the home office for 34 days, if you're then having a business trip, for instance, now in France, it's not counting these days. If you go to Austria, you're looking at work days outside the border zone, and then all of a sudden a business trip to Italy or Spain or France, they are all working days outside of the border zone. So the answer is, unfortunately, not so easy. It really depends on the country combination, whether you should, let's say, count them as home or work, whether they can, let's say, count into a particular threshold, yes or no. All right. I hope these were answered in a sufficient manner. Happy to take any follow-up questions or get any other questions, of course. Quickly to the commuter travel, because of course I'm talking for way too long. Travel calendar. Like I said, we've got this academic truth saying we're applying payroll for 100% here or a split or whatever, and we're paying social security contributions here. All good and great, but it really depends on the actual presence. How do you track actual presence? In a travel calendar. So that's the sole objective of the travel calendar, tracking actual presence of the individual. I will not spend too much on this because I think it's better showing you in the demo like the more concrete things that we want here. But very important for our solution is an ongoing compliance status for both tax and social security. And it basically compares the actual presence from the travel calendar versus this academic truth that you put in at the beginning of the, let's say, the onboarding, or the academic truth of your payroll. Where are you paying taxes, to what extent, and where are you remitting Social Security contributions? And what basically these compliance statuses do is answer the question, does the actual presence justify the payroll setup that you have gone for? And the answer can be yes, all good, so no action to be taken. It could be clearly no, you're present in the home country or in the home office for way too much. It just doesn't justify the payroll split that you went for, so you need to take action. Or something in between. You're basically closing in on a particular threshold. And of course, you don't want to find out that you're doing something wrong when you're already, let's say, deep in the red zone. You'd like a heads up just before you're actually exceeding a threshold, so you can give instructions to the commuter to go to the office a little bit more, for instance. So those are the three, let's say, answer options. And remember, we would answer this question not just for tax, but also for Social Security, because these things change and you might have a different Social Security setup than you've got for taxes. So that is the ongoing compliance statuses that you'll see on the platform. I think a critical aspect of how we try to solve commuter compliance. And we'll show it in practice in a second. I see, Sabina, a follow-up question. So if the company doesn't want to take a risk to be considered having a betriebsstätte, you would recommend having a local provider such as employers of record? Very interesting question. Thanks for this. My answer would be no, to be quite frank, because an employer of record doesn't change or doesn't take away your betriebsstätte. Simply still got someone creating value for you in, well, we took the example of Austria. And just saying this individual is now employed through an employer of record doesn't change the fact that this individual is creating value for you. So betriebsstätte thematic around employers of record is very, very interesting. Of course, URs will claim that they kind of act as a buffer between you as a company creating value in Austria, in the example, and the tax authorities. That might be right, because the tax authorities will not see you having any registration or any presence in Austria. But theoretically, having an EOR in between doesn't change the EOR, the PE risk at all, unfortunately. Thanks, Joran, for your question. The simple answer to the question, does your platform also support obtaining A1s or COCs for commuters? Yes, we do. So for regular business travelers and work creationists, we request A1s and COCs. For commuters, you'd rather go with a multi-state A1, which we also request and obtain from the authorities, and then make available for you and the commuter on the platform. All right. I think, Kody, it's about time that we just show the platform instead of me talking theory. What do you think?
Yes, let's go for it. So I will take over and share my screen. So Pieter, if you want to give me a little okay, that everyone can see it.
Yes.
You're good on your side. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the platform itself before diving right into the commuter functions, but it all kind of bleeds into one another. So we're looking at a login view, someone who is set up potentially as an HR administrator or maybe leads the global mobility team at an organization. And here you could see a variety of options on the left-hand side, and we'll kind of go through each one that pertains to commuters. So first off the bat is we have a list of all the employees at our organization. There's multiple filter options here to find the commuters in question. You have the ability to change the type of cross-border employees that that individual is. So I've labeled all these ones as commuters for demo purposes. So this really just shows the list of all the employees at the organization. Again, inviting new employees is up here is pretty quick and seamless, and we can also plug into any HRIS systems as well. At the same time, not only does WorkFlex support the commuter function, but we also support business travel and workation. So this particular client that I'm showing, it has a business travel only organization and commuter, and we can see here all the business travel requests. There's only one for this particular case here with all the information pertaining to that that trip. All the documentations here as well, and then we have one pending as well as it's going through. But from a compliance standpoint, it is complete. If we label a individual as a commuter, as Pieter mentioned, we have to ask a few qualifying questions about the commuter before, let's say, unlocking that commuter calendar. So these are the questions and the profile questions that Pieter was mentioning in these slides. So for this example here, we're going to say the work country is in Luxembourg, and the home country for this individual is Germany. And then they get asked 2 additional follow-up questions, and it might change depending on if they have an official commuter agreement. If they answer yes, no additional questions are required here. Answered no, then they just have to talk about they have to mention where their tax split is. We offer the 2 most common responses, which is 100% in either the work country or the home country, but they also have the ability to set up a split if it's 60-40, 70-30, whatever the case may be. So for this one, we're going to say 100% in Luxembourg in the work country, and then where are the social securities paid as well within Luxembourg. Pieter, did you want to add anything to this? Because I know this was part of the slide decks that you were sharing.
Yeah, just to add, and so this is how in practice, you as a company, this would usually be, let's say, someone from HR, GM filling this out. This is where you create what I earlier called, let's say, the academic truth. This is how you're simply running payroll, not necessarily how it would be correct, because that's to be determined in comparison to the actual presence. But you are running payroll for this individual somewhere and paying social security contributions. And this is how you basically tell us where this is taking place today.
Yes. And this is available to both the HR administrators or any HR individual as well, even assistants of commuters, if that is the case. They can fill this on behalf of the commuters themselves, or the commuter is just invited via email saying, please fill out this quick information about your commuter status, and then it'll unlock the calendar. So hitting submit will unlock the calendar. For this case that's loading right now, this calendar is going to be completely empty because this is a fresh new commuter on the platform. So I'm going to move over to a calendar with a different country combination that is filled out for the year of 2024. So in this particular case, we have an individual working in the Netherlands and paying Social Security in the Netherlands as well, but they reside in Belgium. What Pieter mentioned in the slides is the different statuses, and this is really the kind of the bread and butter of the solution itself. It tells the commuter and also HR individuals and global mobility team members the current status of the commuters and whether they're falling in line with the rules and regulations based on that country combination. As the individual throughout the year fills out their calendar, and filling out the calendars quite simply selecting a day and saying where are you working that day effectively, or if you're sick or on vacation, these statuses will change depending on the thresholds of the country combination and the thresholds of the individual themselves. What we also can, and I'm going to go over to December to make it a little bit more present, is we also pull in any business travel trips or workation trips, if that client has that enabled as well, into the calendar. As you can see here, this individual has a business trip for these dates on the second half of December to add to the total amounts. So what I want to show is this calendar in action. So I'm going to have a few clicks here, and I'm going to adjust some of the days that this individual worked. And let's see if we could change the statuses. And here we go. And I like to zoom in just because there's a little bit of copy here. So we have, this is the second status. This is, let's say, the yellow light, just saying that you need some attention because this individual might be trending towards spending too many days in their home country. So currently, throughout the entire calendar year, we have 234 days spent in the working country and 17 days spent in Belgium. And we have logic in place. We have it written up in here. And based on the different thresholds, this red light, green light yellow light will change. And it basically just provides attention to the user. So at the end of the year, they're not extremely surprised with, oh, I've been in the red since June. Well, that would not be the case if the individual is updating their calendar. Now, we could, if they are working back in their work country for this week here, yeah, we're still within that orange threshold. Again, this is still compliant. This just means that you want to kind of have an eye on the days spent working from home or not. At the end of the day, there's a lot of logic behind both of the tax compliance statuses and the social security status. And how this calendar works really is quite simply, we envision the commuters themselves coming into the platform maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, even once a month, and filling out their calendar throughout the year. And as they're filling out their calendars throughout the year, it gives them kind of the checks and balances to say, yes, I am within the acceptable ranges for both Social Security and for tax compliance within the country combination that I am a commuter of. Yes, so that is effectively how the commuter solution works. It counts events. We're taking away the days where these events were typically counted in an Excel sheet, which could be easily manipulated, doesn't really have logic behind the scenes, or what we hear quite a bit from clients and from potential users of our platform is sometimes these are just emails sent over to HR saying, yes, I'm working 3 days here, I'm working 4 days here. And you can imagine at the end of the year, this could become quite a big mess in order to confirm that the commuters are actually staying compliant. We want something a little bit more real time so they can adjust their habits, adjust their travel as needed.
And maybe to add to this, Kody, what we see in practice quite a lot is that then clients have been working these Excel files, quite an annoying task for the commuter, and then HR or GM sits on a bunch of data, a bunch of Excel files showing presence, but then like often the question in their minds is raised like, okay, but well, yeah, now what does it tell me? Right? So it's not only the burden of keeping the days in a very easy way, but also immediately getting the answer, okay, but the so what of the data that you've got on the calendar. And maybe two additional remarks. So like Kody already said, we've got all the combinations. There are tons of logic behind this, because now we're looking at a combination in the Netherlands and Belgium, but the tax compliance status, the ongoing status as well for taxation and social security is very different. The logic behind it, if you're looking at the combination between Germany and Austria or Switzerland and France. So we've got the logic for this behind in the background already, which is really cool. And hopefully you agree that we've made it fairly simple for the user, but the complexity behind it is pretty advanced. And the other remark is, I know probably some of you have seen tax calendars in your lives before, and it just always shows the same drop down, like work country, home country. But what we've seen before is that sometimes I'm not really interested only in the work country or the work and the home country, but I'm actually interested, was this a work day outside the border zone? Yes or no? Our travel calendar is smart in that sense that depending on the country combination, so Austria and Germany, for instance, the drop down that Kody just showed, which for the Netherlands and Belgium is pretty simple, work home or absent, or just basically another day, looks very different for people between Austria and Germany, because there the border zone is relevant. So let's say the click-through options are smart in this travel calendar, depending on the country combination that you went for.
Okay, and that's the that is the demo there.
Thank you very much. So if you have any questions on the demo, you would like to see something more, then just tell us in the chat. In the meantime, I will take your other questions. Sabina, thanks for that. Do we also do S1 forms? Answer to that one is we instruct the employee if required. So with the introduction of the European health insurance card, the relevance of the S1 document has deteriorated or decreased at least. Only if you've got like bigger surgery plan, I think it's recommended to get one. The difference between S1s and A1s is that A1s are rather easy to obtain for an employer. An S1 is usually a very individual thing. They need their digital login. For instance, in the Netherlands, you've got this digital login. And it's something that we as a provider, or sometimes even you as an employer, can't really do. So we'll give instructions if required, but we usually don't get S1s for our travelers, or, well, more importantly, for commuters, for grensganger. All right.
Peter, I could take care of a question in the chat there. So Nicole, yeah. So is the calendar filled in by someone like a PA, I'm assuming personal assistant, or pulled from somewhere else? Well, that's the beauty of WorkFlex. We have different views based on the different account types. So we also have an assistant function. So assistants will have a list of individuals that they assist or manage, if they manage their travel, business travel, or workations, or commute. So yes, it can be filled out by a PA. It can be filled out by the commuters themselves. It can also be filled out by HR administrators. So they have the ability to make those changes. As clienteles come on, we obviously need to get this data from whatever system they're using in the past, whether that's Excel or sticky notes, or maybe there is another platform that is being used out there. What we do is we set up every single commuter with their up-to-date calendars in our platform. So the moment that they log in, there's rubber on the road. All they have to do is maintain their calendar as the year goes on.
Amazing, thank you. What about employees who are lax and don't fill in, do not want to log in? How is it managed in these cases?
Oh yeah, good question. So we try to do our best to at least message and send some sort of emails or communications to these individuals when their calendars are, let's say, has a threshold of a few weeks behind where they should be. What we found, we have this in other instances as well, what we find is actually alerting HR administrators or the global mobility individuals within the organization, saying commuter X, Y, and Z have been neglecting their calendar, typically kind of lights a little bit of a fire within the organizations themselves to approach those commuters to fill out those calendars. So that seems to be the best. The system is only works if there's input, if there's data being inputted. We have no tracking on the individuals. We have no idea what country that they're in. We only know what they tell us. So without it, the system doesn't work, or is at least not as accurate as it should be with the actual inputs. Yeah, thanks. We do have some checks. We do have some balances in place.
Yes, of course. Thanks for the questions, Nico, and thanks also, by the way, Gabriele, for the nice feedback. Yeah, look, it starts with data, right? So if someone is not good at giving us any information, it's going to be very difficult to be compliant. I think in general with commuters, they'd be willing to fill out a travel calendar as long as it's easy. Well, it doesn't get much easier than this travel calendar, at least. So that's the good news. If they are really failing to complete, it's rather an internal escalation. And I'm happy to provide insights also on like what is happening if you're not giving the right information as a commuter, but you as the employer still want to be compliant. And bottom line, that's going to be expensive for the employee, and say, look, we have no clue. You're not filling out your travel calendar. So we're going to do what makes us compliant, which is withholding in both home and work. Well, you can calculate your net salary in that case. That will probably trigger the commuter to fill out the calendar. But look, I think in the world of commuters, it's people being lax. I wasn't aware of this word, but being lazy or sloppy with filling out travel calendars is partially because maybe they didn't want to, but also because the solutions in place, Excel or whatever type of travel calendar, were just rather mediocre in terms of user friendliness. And I think hopefully we've changed it. And maybe to stick with data a little bit is, so WorkFlex now doesn't only offer commuter compliance. We're trying to build this bigger platform where all the, let's say, work from abroad, business travel, workations, commuter, assignments, etc., is in one platform. So it really doesn't get much easier than that. And with having all the information in one platform, it's also easy to, at the end of the year, generate reports so that people can do the personal income tax returns correctly, etc. So data is critical. Without data, it's not going to work. So much is clear. So I see no Are personal holidays to be excluded from the calendar? We always saw it in the drop down. So there's always an option for other days. So days that are not relevant for counting, but because they're not relevant for counting, they're still relevant because they basically do not end up at the bottom part of the equation. So they are to be included as other days. So of course they don't have to tell us where they were or why they were exactly sick. But let's say non-working days are to be registered as well. All right, so almost through the full hour that we had blocked, but we actually wanted to keep it a little bit shorter to give you a couple of minutes back before your next meeting starts. Only 2 closing remarks. Checking if there's any other questions. I think not, which is good. 2 closing remarks. So if you want to learn more about the Commuter solution that we've just presented, then you click that button that now pops in your screen. We'll book you a meeting. We're really happy to show you more, tell you more of the backgrounds, and also learn from you whether the solution that we've built would actually, let's say, ease your pain. So please feel free to book a demo with one of our consultants. And the other remark is, if you've liked this webinar, kind of tells me you are a global mobility technicalities lover, like me and like Kody has become basically over the past year, then another webinar might be of interest for you, because there is a big adjustment coming up in the world of posted worker notifications. Well, is it coming up? That's actually the question. But there are things going on at a European level where a big change in how PWD notifications are to be done is proposed. And together with Martina Mengi from WorkFlex, a PhD in the area of PWDs, even, we will be discussing the proposed changes and how it affects compliance, how it will affect you, the pros and cons, etc. That webinar will take place December 17th, 11 to 12, and you can simply hit the button register here right now, and then you can register for that webinar. We are very much looking forward to seeing you again during that webinar. If there's any other questions relating or resulting from this one, like I said, book a meeting or just send them through email or LinkedIn. Very happy to hear any feedback. I'm going to give 3 more seconds for any questions or remarks.
We might have one more message being typed out in the chat by
Yeah, I see that.
Oh, it was a thank you very much. Yeah, well, we appreciate it.
Well, we can only sound that thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Kody, for joining in, for showing the product. Highly appreciate it. And then we wish you a very happy rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.